I recently caught up with an old colleague, a sociology professor in Beijing. He spent nearly a decade at the London School of Economics.
Oh, wow. So he was deep in the Western academic system.
Completely. And we were sitting in this quiet cafe near the university, and I was expecting, the usual academic chatter, maybe the latest debates on identity politics, post-structuralism, that kind of thing. He always used to be the kind of man who had a well-thumbed copy of Foucault in his briefcase.
Right. I know the type.
But then, as we sat there, he pushes this thick, spiral-bound document across the table. And it wasn't, a collection of theoretical essays. It was a granular investigation report.
On what?
On the logistical arteries and the power grid stability of a megacity cluster in the Pearl River Delta.
Not Foucault.
Not at all. And I asked him, where's the sociology and all these technical metrics? He didn't even look offended. He just gave me this calm, almost unsettlingly focused smile and said, "We finally finished our apprenticeship. We don't need to borrow someone else's eyes to see our own house anymore."
That is a powerful statement. Finished our apprenticeship.
It is. He explained that for years he felt like he was trying to diagnose a millennia-old patient using a medical textbook written for a different species. To him, all those Western theories he once championed, he now sees them as intellectual viruses.
Viruses.
Yeah. Abstract constructs of the atomized individual that he believes lead to nothing but spiritual exhaustion and societal decay. He said he wasn't interested in the semantic games of the West anymore. Instead, he's talking about cultural immunity and algorithmic execution with the cold precision of a structural engineer.
So a complete 180 from philosopher to engineer.
Exactly. And that shift, it just left me stunned. It wasn't just a change in his curriculum. It felt like a declaration of intellectual sovereignty. It really made me wonder, what happens when a global power decides that your universal values are actually just a form of academic colonization?
Yeah.
As we sat there, it became so clear. The era of China as a student of the West is officially over. They aren't just rewriting the textbooks. They're building a great wall of the mind, and the implications for the rest of the world are just staggering.
That is a weighty conversation you had, and it really cuts right to the core of what we're diving into today. This isn't just, some bureaucratic reform or a passing academic trend.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's a profound structural declaration of intellectual sovereignty, and it seems to be rooted in a very deep historical confidence.
The weight of that professor's statement is enormous because it signals this fundamental change in how knowledge is produced, how it's applied, and how it's governed. It really is a pivot from the philosophical to the engineering mindset. So our mission today is to really unpack the academic and structural revolution that's underpinning this declaration, to give you a shortcut to understanding this really epical shift.
And our sources show that this transformation is really defined by three interconnected developments. They all sort of work in synergy. First, we'll look at the complete transformation of Chinese sociology.
The move away from abstract imported theory.
Exactly. It's becoming a strategic, technocratic tool that's focused entirely on managing large-scale stability, all within their unique framework of what they call the civilizational state.
Okay, and then second, there's the defensive mechanism.
The defensive mechanism, yes. The establishment of an autonomous knowledge system. This is the intellectual firewall, or the cultural immunity that your professor friend mentioned.
It's built as a core defense against what they see as foreign influence, or as they put it, viral narratives.
And finally, we'll look at the practical culmination of all this, the rapid transition toward algorithmic governance. This is where it gets really futuristic.
This is the large-scale leverage of AI and big data
to achieve highly efficient, precise social management. And it's being actively presented and implemented as a superior administrative alternative to traditional Western models.
Okay, let's unpack that first part then. The shift from abstract theory to the cold, hard logic of practical statecraft. It has to start with the foundation, right? This concept of the civilizational state.
It does.
Because this isn't just semantics. It feels like a completely different way of conceiving the relationship between the state and the people. What exactly does that mean? How is it so different from the Westphalian nation-state model that we all know?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer scale and the longevity that's implied. A civilizational state is fundamentally different from the Westphalian model.
Which defines a nation by what? Territory and language.
Right. Fixed historical territory, a dominant ethno-linguistic group.
Right.
And it usually only traces its origins back a few centuries. The civilizational state, as it's being articulated here, aims to represent something far, far grander. It's a single, unique, continuous civilization that spans millennia.
So the source of legitimate authority, its legitimacy, it doesn't come from a single moment in time like a revolution or a constitution.
No, or a specific treaty. The authority comes from the long, uninterrupted arc of history itself. The state is seen as an ongoing project, not a fixed contract.
That's a huge difference.
It's massive. The state derives its natural authority not from, say, popular consent based on the shifting whims of an electorate, but from its proven capacity to maintain a continuous, stable socio-political order over thousands of years.
So it positions itself as the guardian.
The literal guardian of the collective society. Its primary job is ensuring the continuity of the civilization itself. And this long-term legitimacy gives it the mandate for these huge, large-scale preventative actions.
That structural reality is why those markers of continuity are so critical to them. The emphasis on cultural unity across these vast geographic distances, the unbroken historical record.
And the writing system. The longevity of the Chinese writing system is seen as a unifying technology that works across all these diverse dialects and regions. It's a governing philosophy that's built on resilience above all else.
And this framework, this is what justifies that intellectual pivot we were talking about, the end of the academic apprenticeship.
The definitive end.
Yeah.
They view the adoption of Western theories over the last century or so as this unfortunate period of sociological colonization.
Like they were forced to see their own history through a borrowed, fragmented lens.
Exactly. Which brings me back to what your professor colleague said. It's so perfect, feeling like he was diagnosing a millennial-old patient with a textbook written for a different species.
So what's the specific problem they have with those Western textbooks? What's the core issue?
The problem lies in the core theoretical unit. They reject, fundamentally, any theory that's predicated on the atomized individual.
The idea of the individual as the base unit of society. The Western liberal subject defined by rights and individual claims.
That entire construct is seen as fundamentally divorced from their reality, which is the reality of collective survival and civilizational continuity. For a nation of that scale, the collective, the social fabric, that's the primary reality. The individual is secondary.
Which brings us back to that very stark description. Intellectual viruses, ideas that promote spiritual exhaustion and societal decay. What are the practical outcomes they see coming from those Western concepts?
The critique is really twofold. First, they argue that Western theories, especially those focused on abstract property rights or postmodern identity politics, that they lead to policy paralysis.
How so?
They believe it fragments society, it breaks it into competing, litigious, and often mutually hostile groups, and it prioritizes what your friend called semantic games over actual material outcomes.
So endless debate instead of action.
Endless debate. And second, they argue that if you force the analysis of a millennia-old unified civilization through this fragmented lens, you inevitably get flawed policy and unstable outcomes because you're fundamentally misrepresenting the social dynamic.
So the movement is a transcendence, they call it, toward a phase of practical implementation. The theory is judged entirely by its tangible outcomes, by its governance efficacy. Does it work?
Does it work to maintain the order, the velocity, the stability of the civilizational project? That's the only test that matters.
And that explains the shift from philosophy to a tool for statecraft. Sociology moves away from the endless abstract debate about what should be.
And moves toward the rigorous, engineering-focused management of what is on a massive structural scale.
And we have a perfect, really granular example of this, the story of this senior sociologist, Lao Chen. He seems to be the embodiment of this new technocratic turn.
He really is. Lao Chen's experience, it kind of illustrates the painful journey of this intellectual pivot. He spent decades struggling in the rural hinterlands, trying to apply concepts like individual autonomy and, adversarial procedural rights.
Western legal concept.
Exactly. Applying them to communities defined by deep kinship ties and centuries-old land use traditions. And it didn't work. Those concepts often just cause bureaucratic deadlock and a lot of community resentment.
And then came the reforms. This new mandate for the investigation report, which demanded that sociological theory be distilled directly from physical reality.
And Lao Chen was tasked with this extremely complex relocation. Multiple villages had to be moved for a new, massive hydroelectric infrastructure hub. This is where the old methodology failed completely and the new one succeeded.
So the traditional Western approach.
Yeah.
That would have been a long, messy process, right? Based on compensating individual landowners?
Lengthy, often litigious, ensuring meticulous adherence to abstract procedural rights. And it wouldn't have mattered if the social fabric was destroyed in the process. That approach often leads to huge delays and resistance because you're literally tearing a community apart.
But Lao Chen recognized that his mandate was different. It wasn't just to compensate individuals.
His mandate was to preserve the social fabric to ensure long-term stability across the new relocated community.
So what did he do?
He abandoned the abstract procedural rights model entirely. His methodology became revolutionary in its pragmatism. He mapped out the intricate social lineages, the kinship networks, ancestral ties, the economic dependencies of the entire valley.
So he treated the community not as a collection of individuals with competing claims,
but as a single, cohesive civilizational unit. A living organism whose metabolic function had to be preserved during the transplant.
So his investigation report, it wasn't a bureaucratic checklist, it was a complex social engineering blueprint.
A blueprint designed to transplant the entire social structure intact, ensuring that, for example, two families who historically shared irrigation or marriage rights would end up living near each other in the new location. He preserved the network.
That's the key distinction, isn't it? The ultimate goal wasn't just physical relocation.
It was the preservation of the social fabric. And that ensures stability, it minimizes disruption to the state's massive infrastructure project, and it guarantees long-term success. Lao Chen's success is held up as the ultimate proof of this shift from apprenticeship to ownership.
The theory is derived directly from the successful management of reality.
It's a pragmatic realization that in a nation of this overwhelming scale and social complexity, social stability itself, that gets elevated to the highest form of human welfare. The state's ability to deliver stability and infrastructure becomes the ultimate good.
So Lao Chen's work proves that sociology is no longer a library-bound philosophy. It's a literal tool for statecraft.
It's moved beyond debate to the management of reality. And this is all codified through that investigation report mandate.
And that mandate forces this methodological revolution. It demands that theory be distilled directly from physical empiricism, from granular reality. It's a demand for actionable knowledge.
From the ground up, not imported from above. The task of authentic scholarship is now defined as conducting a deep tissue scan of a civilization's physical corpus. The focus is resolutely material. It's measurable.
So we're talking about mapping physical output, infrastructure like ports, power grids, logistical arteries.
And defining the nation's social metabolism.
Social metabolism. That concept is fascinating. It sounds like sociology's role is now to diagnose and solve the core metabolic problems of an ultra-large-scale society, just like an engineer would diagnose a complex machine.
That is precisely the metaphor they use. If the civilization is a massive interconnected organism, sociology is the field responsible for its internal health and optimization.
So that includes massive governance challenges, like optimizing the energy and movement systems of megacity clusters.
Exactly. Ensuring resources flow efficiently, that labor mobility is robust. It's about engineering reliable channels for intergenerational mobility to prevent social stagnation, solving the big structural problems.
So when my professor colleague showed me that report on power grid stability and logistical arteries, he wasn't switching professions from sociology to engineering.
No, he was demonstrating the new sociology. It's the diagnostic tool for the civilizational body.
And the sociological gaze is now fixed on physical output, on measurable social stability. It reinforces the logic that theory is judged only by its tangible governance efficacy.
The data-driven, practical report replaces the abstract philosophical essay.
And that entire foundational shift from relying on Western theory to developing this practical technocratic statecraft, that leads us directly into the second part of the strategy.
Which is how they're building the intellectual defense mechanism to protect these newly formulated ideas from any external interference.
This brings us to the fortification of the mind, the construction of an autonomous knowledge system in Chinese academia. This functions as a vital intellectual firewall to establish cognitive sovereignty.
It's fundamentally about building national resilience against the perceived decadence and fragmentation that they see as inherent in Western liberal narratives.
The system's primary function, then, is to fortify the nation's cognitive sovereignty, to act as a cultural immunity layer. They are actively trying to filter out intellectual intrusions that they believe threaten the stability and unity prized by the civilizational state.
And the defense goal is extremely explicit: to filter out viral narratives. This is rooted in a philosophy of what you could call anti-universalism.
Explain that.
They assert that so-called universal values, concepts like democracy, individual rights, free speech, are often just subtle variants of hegemonic power.
So they're not universal at all.
They're seen as vehicles for academic and cultural colonization, masking particular Western interests behind this facade of universalism.
And this anti-universalist stance sees those foreign intellectual templates as actively destabilizing. If those values lead to the spiritual exhaustion and societal decay we talked about, then they have to be treated as a threat.
A threat to national velocity and continuity. In contrast, the new Chinese theory is grounded entirely in the logic of tangible outcomes and governance efficacy.
A logic derived from physical output and measurable social stability.
Right. It's a comparison of effectiveness. Which system better serves the long-term survival of a major civilization? That's the question they're asking.
And the outcome they want is to allow their civilization to grow at its own pace, rooted in its own history, asserting that a 5,000-year history should not be defined or analyzed by a 200-year-old foreign social template.
A template designed for a smaller, fragmented political unit. That, to them, is the definition of intellectual maturity.
And we can actually see the internal struggle that comes with this transition in the story of Dr. Zhang.
Yes, the young academic who returned to Beijing after years studying in London, she experienced a profound intellectual culture shock.
She had specialized in sophisticated areas like postmodern identity politics, complex critical theory.
The semantic games your professor friend rejected.
Exactly. And suddenly, her syllabus, her research priorities, they were all being dictated by this new autonomous knowledge system. The focus was on statecraft and empiricism. And initially, she felt restricted, right? She thought the curriculum was narrowing her intellectual scope.
But the shift came during a mandated field trip to a local manufacturing district that was experiencing some significant tension, a looming labor dispute involving several thousand workers. She expected to see a litigious breakdown, which would be the typical Western outcome.
Instead, she watched the local officials navigate the dispute, and they didn't rely on abstract, individual legal claims.
No, they skillfully employed traditional Confucian mediation techniques. The focus was on restoring harmony and collective obligation. And they combined that with a rigorous assessment based on modern material empiricism.
So looking at the company's physical output data, profit margins, the specific material needs of the workers' families.
And that was her true aha moment. She realized that the Western model she had mastered, the atomized individual, seeking maximal rights through confrontation, it just failed to account for the deep-seated Chinese value of social harmony and national velocity.
It lacked the context for effective collective action.
It couldn't resolve issues quickly and prevent systemic friction. And she concluded that the Great Wall of the Mind, this intellectual firewall, was not a confinement. It was a necessary defense mechanism to stabilize the country's momentum.
She realized that reclaiming cognitive sovereignty was essential to stop viewing the world through a borrowed, unsuitable lens, a lens that led to intellectual paralysis and social fragmentation.
And this intellectual break is strategically vital. It extends far beyond social theory. It's fundamentally tied to the strategic development of independent digital technology.
How so?
Well, establishing an independent knowledge and discourse system is seen as a historical necessity to shed what they call path dependence, knowledge dependence, method dependence, and tool dependence, especially in information technology.
So, the reliance on Western technological frameworks and software, that created a vulnerability. It allowed the intellectual viruses to enter. Is that the idea?
That's precisely the idea. If your tools, your software, your underlying theoretical frameworks are all foreign, your entire system of thought remains dependent. But they look back to previous successes in achieving technological independence as a model for this current push.
Right. We can look back to the 1990s as a foundational example. The invention of China's own SPC exchange technology system. That was a radical departure.
That was a key victory. Developing their own proprietary system allowed them to break the Western monopoly on telecommunications infrastructure. And crucially, by innovating independently, they gained freedom from debilitating global patent lawsuits.
Which would have slowed the entire civilizational project down to a crawl.
Exactly. It allowed them to rapidly scale their domestic telecommunications network without the threat of legal strangulation. And this demonstrated that the Chinese path, when successful and original, not only ensures domestic stability, but also gains global acceptance.
And this strategic innovation continued into the most cutting-edge sectors. broadband mobile communication, for example, where China achieved breakthroughs by pursuing tech paths that others had actually abandoned.
They optimized for their own reality. That focus on solving their own massive-scale problems led to superior technical solutions. And that's why their mobile communication technology and industry now rank among the highest in the world. This history of technological sovereignty gives them the confidence that they can achieve the same thing with intellectual and sociological sovereignty.
Okay, so this leads us to the core values that underpin this entire independent knowledge system, the architectural blueprint, if you will.
Right, there are a few key pillars. The first is proceeding from China's reality. That means focusing relentlessly on solving domestic development problems with original theories and technologies, leveraging the advantages of being a latecomer, and using the new whole nation system to leapfrog established norms.
And building on that, the second value is coordinating security and development. This is the one body, two wings idea.
The two-wheel drive of cybersecurity and informatization. They see security and progress not as a trade-off, but as fundamentally intertwined aspects of the same national engine. You can't have one without the other in a massive digital society.
This intense coordination between security and development then leads directly to the third and most complex technical pillar, the development of a unique endogenous safety and security technology system.
This is a deep structural challenge they're trying to solve, and it's a worldwide problem. The endogenous safety system is designed to fundamentally solve the generalized functional safety problem.
Okay, break that down. What's the problem it's trying to solve?
Well, historically, in critical infrastructure, functional safety, meaning the system works correctly, like a train braking properly, and cybersecurity, which is protecting the system from external attack, were often treated as separate layers. The problem is they frequently overlap, and that creates vulnerabilities.
So they're aiming to uncouple the cybersecurity and functional safety of critical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of why that uncoupling is such a strategic advantage?
Sure. Think about a high-speed rail control system. In a standard system, a successful cyber attack on the network might directly compromise the functional safety mechanism, which could cause a crash.
Right.
An endogenous safety system, by design, would ensure that the fundamental safety mechanisms operate independently of the external network's cybersecurity status. Even if the network is compromised, the train physically cannot exceed safe parameters or crash.
So they're engineering resilience at the deepest structural level. Functional stability comes from the internal design, not from depending on external network protection.
Exactly. It's a colossal engineering commitment, and it's aimed at maintaining the systemic health of the civilizational state, even under stress.
Which brings us to the fourth value, which is a fascinating counterpoint to the whole Great Wall of the Mind metaphor, a commitment to absorb and learn from all outstanding achievements.
This is critical. It dispels the notion that this is a system that's just shutting itself up or working behind closed doors. The goal isn't isolation. The goal is to define the rules of engagement. They're explicitly stating that this system is designed to win global consensus with the China plan by drawing on all advanced technologies globally, but incorporating them on their own terms.
And this absorption is exemplified by concepts like the multimodal network.
Correct. The multimodal network is designed to provide a theoretical guarantee for a higher standard of opening up. It integrates diverse, heterogeneous networks, different tech standards, different applications, into a unified infrastructure architecture.
So it solves the contradiction between needing diversity for openness and needing unity for efficient centralized governance.
That's the idea. It lets them absorb global technology without inheriting the structural dependence.
And finally, the fifth value. Applying all of this theoretical and technical infrastructure toward an independent talent cultivation system.
Right. The goal is to cultivate talent with originality, independent thinking, and a scientific mindset to steadfastly solve China's specific digitalization problems. The whole pursuit of an independent knowledge system is seen as a way to disengage from what they call the backward cultural shackles of following and imitating.
And instead, promote the brave pursuit of uniqueness and originality tailored to their civilizational needs.
It's an intellectual decoupling designed to foster endogenous innovation.
That commitment to solving massive-scale domestic problems and achieving hyper-efficiency, It brings us perfectly to the third core focus, the shift toward algorithmic execution and technocratic governance.
This is the operational summit of the entire cognitive shift. The sociological shift we saw with Lao Shen, now married to this independent technology system, is what enables this high-efficiency alternative.
This is where governments are rapidly integrating AI, machine learning, and big data analytics into policy execution and social management.
It's a move away from relying on slow, human, bureaucratic judgment and institutional routines, and a move towards a reliance on automated computational models driven by procedural rationality.
And the sources are very clear on the overwhelming perceived benefits: enhanced operational efficiency, predictive capacity, evidence-based policy interventions, and responsiveness.
In simple terms, it allows the government to respond faster and more effectively to complex, massive societal challenges than traditional bureaucratic systems ever could.
So algorithmic execution is the tool that lets them translate that macro-social will, the desire for long-term stability, into micro-social management.
With unprecedented precision and minimal systemic friction, which is paramount in a society trying to manage, 1.5 billion people in an economy of continental scale.
And the high-tech reality of this is perfectly captured in the story of the data scientist Xiao Wei in the command center.
Yeah, you have to try and picture this. A state-of-the-art, high-tech command center in a major Tier 1 city like Shenzhen. Xiao Wei isn't reading reports filtered up through layers of bureaucracy. He's monitoring social health through an AI-integrated big data dashboard.
Looking at indicators across logistical networks, employment data, social media sentiment.
The whole system is designed to be preemptive. It spots those metabolic problems before they can escalate. The system might flag potential social friction. Say, a specific cluster of data indicates a sharp spike in dissatisfaction among recent graduates in one particular district because of shifting market conditions.
The algorithm detects this nascent problem, a structural issue that, if you left it unaddressed, could grow into a widespread crisis that disrupts the civilizational metabolism.
And the response is surgical, it's instantaneous, and it's evidence-based.
So instead of the problem needing to filter up through local officials, requiring legislative deliberation, funding debates, months of political gridlock.
A typical Western failure point.
Right. Instead of that, the algorithm triggers immediate targeted interventions.
Specific targeted responses are launched within 48 hours. This could be targeted vocational subsidies channeled directly to those specific districts, or the redirection of smaller, pre-approved infrastructure projects to create immediate localized employment. It's not broad policy, it's highly precise social maintenance.
And Xiao Wei describes his job as exactly that, social maintenance. It operates on a principle of engineering efficiency, not political deliberation.
And this high-efficiency, evidence-based approach is explicitly presented as a superior administrative alternative to the often slow, messy, and publicly contested processes of Western procedural democracy.
The critical intellectual argument here is that for the citizens who receive those tangible material benefits, like finding a new job or a subsidy that was triggered by the algorithm before they even realized the market was dipping, the efficiency and speed of this governance outweighs the abstract appeal of a ballot box.
Output legitimacy, based on delivered material results, supersedes input legitimacy, which is based on procedural democracy.
However, this shift toward computational logic, it has inherent risks. Algorithmic opacity, unintended bias. Even the fastest system is useless if it's fundamentally flawed.
And the source material does address this duality. It emphasizes the necessity of integrating deliberate institutional, ethical, and participatory safeguards. They frame these mechanisms as robust solutions inherent to their system.
So if they're going all in on AI for governance, they have to integrate robust checks and balances to maintain public trust and administrative legitimacy.
And we see three primary mechanisms outlined for transparency and accountability. The first is human-in-the-loop oversight, or HITL.
Okay, let's define that clearly. HITL isn't just a nod to human involvement. It's a structural guarantee that human review remains central to critical decisions. Who is the human in this loop, and what's their function?
The human is usually a domain expert or a local official, someone with a deep contextual knowledge who reviews the algorithm's highest risk recommendations before they get executed. This serves two functions. First, it mitigates any automated bias that general models might have inherited. And second, it preserves procedural legitimacy by ensuring human judgment and accountability remain the ultimate authority, especially in high-stakes applications like resource allocation or localized policy changes. Their role is to override the algorithm if its computational logic clashes with the practical, messy reality on the ground.
Then the second mechanism is explainable AI, or XAI. This is a crucial technological commitment to fighting that black box problem.
Right, providing interpretable justifications for algorithmic outputs. XAI enhances both administrative efficiency and public trust. It requires the system to provide a rationale, not just a recommendation for its decision.
So it allows administrators and auditors to understand why the algorithm flagged a specific district for intervention, or why it recommended one specific policy over another.
It addresses the opacity issue head-on by making these complex computational decisions legible.
And the third mechanism is algorithmic auditing and monitoring.
This is continuous evaluation, both automated and human-led. It's designed to detect biases, subtle drift, errors, and ensure compliance with ethical and legal standards. It provides crucial accountability for these automated processes.
But beyond these technical safeguards, the institutional designs also heavily emphasize something called normative alignment.
Yes, and this is key. It means that ethical constraints and fairness criteria have to be integrated directly into the algorithmic design itself at the engineering phase. The goal is to ensure that the outcomes align with public and civilizational values, like harmony and stability, not just technical performance metrics like maximizing efficiency or speed for its own sake.
So the overall goal is to create a hybrid governance model, a fusion of the technocratic and the normative.
A model that successfully integrates the speed and capabilities of technology with these structured, proactive safeguards.
This is the final layer of legitimacy they're trying to achieve then. It confirms that the state's legitimacy isn't solely based on technical performance.
It has to be effective, yes, but it must also encompass fairness, transparency, and representativeness, all achieved through these structured, proactive safeguards that are designed for their specific civilizational context.
So if we zoom out now and synthesize everything we've discussed, the rejection of the atomized individual, building the intellectual firewall, the shift to hyper-efficient algorithmic execution, what's the overall meaning of this transformation in the long run?
The critical factor here is the weight of time. This entire transformation is viewed internally as a reversion to type for the civilizational state. It's guided by a historical consciousness that operates on a completely different temporal scale than the West.
It embodies a strategic long-termism, which contrasts sharply with political models driven by what they see as short-sighted politics, where social theory is just a slave to quarterly opinion polls and immediate electoral cycles.
These strategic decisions, like building that endogenous safety system, they're made with the next century in view. They prioritize long-term resilience over immediate abstract debate.
The final realization, then, is that the scholars and technicians of the East have transitioned. Fundamentally, they're no longer passive interpreters of external reality or some borrowed theory.
They've become the active architects of their own social and administrative framework. They're designing the system itself.
So their collective work, it constitutes a new civilizational codex.
A codex that's written not in the language of abstract liberal rights or contested theory, but in the concrete grammar of order, efficiency, and survival.
This deep dive really affirms that the era of China as a student of the West is definitively over. It's been replaced by an intellectual sovereignty that leverages a technocratic approach to sociology and high-efficiency algorithmic execution to ensure resilient large-scale governance.